What's going on, guys? It's Nacho, and welcome back to the channel. And today, we are going to be talking about why I think there needs to be a second women's revolution in professional wrestling. It was 2016, or as it is known amongst many hardcore wrestling fans these days, to be the best year for WWE since 2023, aka this year. And at WrestleMania 32, we saw the culmination of a huge movement with the unveiling of a new WWE Women's Championship, with Charlotte Flair, Sasha Banks, and Becky Lynch fighting to become the first women's champion of a new era. But just why exactly was any of this important? Well, unlike how the WWE has tried to rewrite into the history books that the Women's Revolution was started by the Four Horsewomen, the Women's Revolution can actually be linked back to Saraya, aka Paige, who we all remember debuting on Raw, defeating AJ Lee for the Divas title after WrestleMania 30. The Four Horsewomen, who the WWE have tried to name the founders of the revolution, as I mentioned previously, would only be the next chapter of the Women's Revolution when 3 out of 4 aforementioned women debuted on Raw in July of 2015. With each woman being a part of a faction, Becky and Charlotte joining up with Paige to have a name that was immediately scrapped for certain reasons, and Sasha being a part of Team Bad with Naomi and Tamina. And there was also a third group, and in my personal opinion, the funniest group of the three, being Alicia Fox and the Bella Twins, representing a old Divas era, while the other two groups representing the new women's wrestling era. This was not the only thing going on with women in WWE at the time. There was also a burgeoning women's division in NXT. Once Sasha, Becky, and Charlotte made their way to the main roster, it was up to Bayley to hold it down as the NXT Women's Champion. She had stellar matches and feuds with the likes of Alexa Bliss, Carmella, and even Nia Jax, if you can believe that. Bayley would, however, eventually lose the belt to Asuka, and after a brief hiatus and return and rematch with Asuka, she would make her way to the main roster. That was the meat of the Women's Revolution after that, and after WrestleMania 32. We would, of course, see semi-consistent matches and storylines for the women's division. Of course, many people were complaining that there was a heavy focus put onto the horsewomen and their respective factions and no one else. And to be fair, that's kind of all the women's division had to work with at the time. There were other people involved, but they just weren't being used as well as those 9 women were. But unlike today, you can only be really named Charlotte Flair to get whatever you want. Now, don't get me wrong, there are still some great women's talent on today's roster. Bianca Belair, Rhea Ripley, Io Sky, Zoe Stark, Chelsea Green, Liv Morgan, just to name a few. But the point of this video is to explain why these women deserve better, because comparing the scene now to 2016, I personally believe it's quite a mess. And this is all partly due to good old Tony Khan and his lack of women's wrestling, because his booking style of one women's segment per week is terrible, but more on the AEW side of the revolution in a minute. As for the WWE women, I want to see more impactful stories for these ladies. They all deserve much more than the same old recycling of stories and champions that they have been doing. I mean, how many times is Charlotte going to have to show us that she is ready for Asuka? Once was enough? Twice? Thrice? Quarter? Whatever? Twice? I don't know. I think they easily have the means to do an Evolution 2 with the likes of Rhea Ripley, Ronda Rousey, Shayna Baszler, Zoe Stark, Becky Lynch. You have a bunch of great talent. You should be able to showcase them, even if it's a live event that's recorded and you just label it as Evolution 2. It's still a little lesser than what they should be getting, but it's better than just not giving them a second event at all. I truly believe that WWE is on the cusp of something great with Rhea as Women's World Heavyweight Champion, as I just mentioned, but my only issue with the whole thing as of right now is that there is not a soul on the Raw roster that is beating her for that belt, unless Vinnie Mac decides to write in for a superstar shakeup and have Charlotte pull up to Raw one night. Another small and weird nitpicky issue I have with both women's titles is the laziness of just making them the same as the men's title, but with a white strap. I know that a lot of people love the designs and understand the corporate synergy of it, and I do understand the whole brand synergy aspect of that, but I do find it quite boring that they had the same 4 title unveilings in the span of a month. I'm genuinely surprised that they didn't just hand the white belts to the women backstage, but the fact that they had a grand unveiling was nice. I just wish that there was a bit more uniqueness to the two women's titles than just white strap. To shift focus and look at AEW women's division for a second, Tony Khan is the most polarizing figure in pro wrestling currently. With his constant flippy-floppy booking, one of the biggest complaints from some fans is the lack of women's matches. I've said in the past how it is pretty much on brand for Tony to have one women's match per week on each show, and 3 sounds like a lot, but let's do a little math lesson here real quick, ladies and gentlemen. Dynamite, Rampage, and Collision are collectively 5 hours of programming a week for AEW. If Tony does one women's match on each show with a minimum of 10 minutes, which would be closer to 12 to 13 if it runs through a commercial break, that's only 35 to 40 minutes of women's wrestling a week, and damn near everything else is saved for the men. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it would be a much better improvement from the average 20 minutes we get with the women across 3 different shows on AEW main roster programming. AEW has the capabilities to have more than one women's match a week. I mean, Tony has constantly flipped between a women's match for the TBS title scene one week and then one revolving around the women's world title the next week. Why can't there be a match for both title scenes each week, advancing both stories at the same time, rather than having to flip back and forth between each titles each week? Tony has given us samplings of hope, with him occasionally having the women main event a Dynamite once in a while, but then for the next 6 months, the women are back to their standard 9:30 p.m. or 6:30 p.m. spot, with a strict cutoff of 9:45, so that the main event has enough time to breathe. Which again, I think is very unfair to the women. I think the best thing AEW can do is take a page out of the book of the WWE fan base. Which I know sounds fucking crazy. That is why I think a women's revolution 2 is in much need of happening sooner rather than later. Not only does AEW need to get with the times and feature a fair amount of women's wrestling, after all, Saraya said she was there to make a change, and it still feels the same in the women's division as it did when AEW was born in 2019, with a rotating crop of talent. A fresh feel and more captivating stories for the women would be awesome. Imagine the cinema they could produce over in WWE if they told the story of Bayley and her disconnect from Becky and Charlotte, especially since the departure of Sasha Banks, or the slow burn story of Io Sky and Bayley turning on each other, or what I think might be more possible, Io Sky and Dakota Kai turning on each other, with Bayley staying loyal to Io Sky. But there are so many possibilities, not only for WWE with their women, but for AEW and their women as well. One story in particular that I think would be perfect between either company is the return of Beth Phoenix to take on Rhea Ripley for her Women's World Heavyweight Championship. Like I said earlier, Rhea's title run thus far has been okay, but it has been missing that key feud to shift it into an all-timer of a title run. Imagine Rhea dominates the rest of the Raw roster up until the Rumble, where Beth returns after the concerto from Rhea, and they have a killer match, and that's what starts the build-up to Rhea losing her title. Or maybe she holds it forever. Either option is cool in my opinion. At the end of the day, I want to see banger matches from everyone, and I want to see the opportunity for everyone to have those matches, and that even stretches to the women as well. Because the main portion of AEW fans, for example, may not like women's wrestling, but that is primarily because Tony Khan books it for shit. If he gave it time and developed it even remotely to the same level he does the main scene in the men's division, I believe AEW would see a boost in engagement for their women's division entirely. I want to end this video by talking about the future of the women's division in both companies as well. For WWE, they are set with an amazing roster and NXT women's roster featuring Rhea Ripley, Bianca Belair, Chelsea Green, Cora Jade, Roxanne Perez, Gigi Dolan, Jacy Jane, and much, much more. Meanwhile, over in AEW, they have Willow Nightingale, who is quickly becoming the most over thing in AEW itself. And as I was making this video, AEW still had Jade Cargill, but it looks like WWE has Jade Cargill now. They also have Sky Blue over in AEW, and once she returns from her injury, hopefully Jamie Hayter still has a major presence in the women's division. The talent is there for both Tony Khan and Triple H/Vince McMahon to give the fans who want to see women's wrestling exactly that, women's wrestling. And it is only on them to give it to us. but it is also on wrestling fans as a whole to make their collective voice heard to those guys in charge. If you want to see women's wrestling, make sure that people understand you want to see women's wrestling. Let me know what you guys think about this video down in the comments below. Should there be a second women's revolution, or do you think the women's wrestling scene in North America is completely fine? Let me know down in the comments below. Like I said, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. This has been Nacho Wrestling, and I will see you guys next time. She take my money. I'm done, baby. 22 minutes. Chopped down to like 13.